Okay. Once again, welcome to the Unshakable Foundation meeting of Cocaine Anonymous. This is a main share meeting, and today it's with lots of gratitude that we welcome Kimia, all the way from Toronto, who's come to share for around 40 minutes around the topic of how to draw near to God, love, after which we'll open up for 50 minutes of Q&A. Kimia, thank you so much. It's over to you.
Thank you so much, Young, and everybody in the room, the whole service crew to this beautiful space. And thank you for the opportunity to be of service, and to have 40 minutes of your time today is a miracle itself. So if you're in this room, you have already drawn near to a power that restores you to sanity. And if you were to take anything from this talk, I hope it's your willingness to work the steps with someone and sponsor someone, pass it on to someone else. If you're looking for sponsorship, many people in this room can hold your hand and take you through these instructions, regardless of what your addiction is. My number is also available. You can reach me on WhatsApp. And so in that, I want to right size my own intention for wanting to speak to this topic. What does it mean to draw near? And that word, God, many of us may have a reaction towards this word, and that's okay. You know, this book also recognizes that. I come from an agnostic atheist background. Under the banner of an institutionalized religious punisher God, my whole family would have been executed if they didn't have a timely escape out of my place of birth. And so in that, I understand that punisher God and lack of a conception that turns into a higher power. I think my own first conception of God as a child was a plate. We had this plate that had a strawberry print on it. And for some reason, I thought that could be God. And there was no one to guide or correct me in that. Being in a family where the word God is still not uttered. And so I don't lead with the chin. Hence the /love. So replace the wording. It says the wording is optional. Replace it with any spiritual concept, any shape, any sound, any smell, any color, any sensation you wish. And so in that, perhaps we can remove the prejudice towards this word. On page 12, it also says, my friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? And that statement hit me hard. Melting the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required to make my beginning. So perhaps we can make that our beginning today. Your willingness to believe that there exists a power that if you draw near, you will have a better way of living. And why is it that I choose this better way of living? Because the old living has failed to work. I've burnt all of my logs, all of the failed strategies, all of the things that I held on to thinking this will work this time. And I identify as a thought addict. Once I start, I can't stop, and I have no control over how much I've taken. The good thing is, it says, while there's probably no human power that can aid you, Kimia, God could and God would if God was sought. So the seeking of that entity is still being left up to me. And why would I seek that today? I have to have a moment of remembering that the old ideals, they didn't work. And if I was to recreate a life based on new ideals, I would have to get a new relationship with this entity, this everlasting activity. Call it your breath. Call it anything you like. That there needs to be an intervention of a sort that self couldn't do on its own. Why is that? That self-sufficiency doesn't really work for me. On page 64, it says, being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us. So self manifesting in various ways, that's what has defeated us. And we considered its common manifestations. So considering the common manifestations that didn't work for me, my willpower, my ability to make decisions, This false pride and assurance and mental faculties that were not restored, change of environment, avoiding people, places, things, counseling, therapy, behavioral modification, detox, war stories, fear, horror, relationships, doctors' ominous warnings. Doesn't stop me, nor does it keep me stopped. And no harm reduction or substitution strategy has worked for me. There's no control using. There's no controlled thinking. Once a thought has been picked up, the rest flow through very easily. And so in that, a lot of harm is being made. But when I know that it says it is self that has defeated us, then I know it's an entity outside of me. There's a parasite that pretends to be the host. And when I am untreated, I believe I'm the parasite. And in that belief, I give my disease the power to draw me closer and closer to it. So why is it that I don't look for shortcuts when I am in handling of that relationship when I'm untreated? And so when the idea is proposed that I need to draw God near and God will propose itself to me, I get all confused. And why is this question important? Because it's the practical application of living a day-to-day life that is full of principles that guide my path, a God-centeredness, that feeling of peace and ease, to be able to make decisions without doubt and fear, consulting 1,000 people and still not having an answer. To remember that there is that all power, the all knowledge of all that will respond to me if I'm willing to have that relationship. So how could that relationship be actually maintained over time? How to draw God near. This book is full of answers. And where is this pulling God near comes from pages 56 and 57, story of minister's son. There's a mention. The back of the book has the full story. The full story is about this self-destruction of this minister's son, who says, if there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me. But later, alone in his room, he asked himself the question, is it possible all the religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. I know that feeling. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Who are you to say there is no God? This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. It poured over through him with certainty and majesty of a great tide at flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. Look at that. Infinite power and love. He had stepped from bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his Creator. That's what it means to draw near. Conscious companionship. Like the companion you actually want around. The person you want to talk to. The person you want to listen. The person who speaks in silence and you hear its silence. You decipher the words. It says, thus was our friend's cornerstone fixed in place. No later vicissitude had shaken it. His alcoholic problem was taken away. That very night years ago, he appeared. Save for a brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. And at such times, a great revulsion has risen up in him. Seemingly, he could not drink even if he would. God had restored his sanity. What is this but a miracle of healing, it says. Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. Yes, my circumstances made me willing to believe. My circumstances were all of the failed strategies and logs I used and didn't work. I still drowned. He humbly offered himself to his maker, and he knew. Even so has God restored us all to our right minds. To this person, this revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly. It takes time. But God has come to all who have honestly sought God. There's the onus. I have to keep seeking. When we drew near to God, God disclosed itself to us. And so in that disclosing itself to us, there is work to be done. I want you to consider this. How can I do its work well? Consider that every time I lose interest in myself and become more and more interested in the world outside of me, I'm drawing God near. Every time I pause when agitated and doubtful, and I go through the instructions of this book, through power of prayer, through the power of meditation, through the power of calling someone who's going to speak the solution to me, not calling 10 people who are not going to be in the same time zone and they're never going to talk to me big book. And so this very concept of drawing near is built into two very close prayers to us, step 3 prayer and in step 7. And drawing God close to us is also embedded in every single step. But I have a feeling that would be a different talk. On our step 3, we say, God, I offer myself to thee. There it is. I'm not sitting there slothing, lazy, procrastination. Yeah, I have to meditate. Oh yeah, I have to pray. Yes, I have to do my inventory. I know I got to be of service. I know what I know. It didn't get me there. Got me here though. And it's not going to get me there. So I need to really put in the works. I need to draw God near. And when I do, I find he's been there the whole time. I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt, as you will. There's trust in that relationship. Relieve me of the bondage of self. I'm drawing God even closer to me. You can relieve me of this bondage that I may better do thy will. Sounds like I'm speaking to a companion that I like. I will do thy will because I know you have happiness, joyousness, and freedom in mind for everyone. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power. There again, I'm closing this thy closer, this entity closer to me. So this entity could become a witness to the power that has flown through me from its power, its love, its way of life. May I do thy will always, always, always. And so on step 7, I say, my creator, these are all turning points. Where am I willing to draw God near and say no to the thought that's going to take me to insanity and death very quickly? And the moment I have woken up knowing that I have taken a few thoughts, because guess what? My drug of choice is anger. What's the quickest way to get there? A certain specific quality of thought. And it's through those little points that I get to my anger quicker. And I drown in self. So I have to turn it over. My creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me. Good and bad and everything in between. The silence of that in between is that thing between me and my higher power. God knows everything in between. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. I'm not praying that God removes from me what is killing me so I can just go out there and party some more. I'm not asking God to give me back the ability to move my fingers and my toes so I can harm others. It's to help others. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. There it is again, drawing God a little bit closer, a little bit closer. I am with you. You are with me, fundamentally deep within me. You're constantly flowing within me, and I believe that to be the truth. And so the more I lose interest in myself, I become more and more interested in this other entity called God. And that entity starts giving me the power of direction in life to be of purpose of maximum helpfulness. It says when we sincerely took such a position, what position is that? That God is the employer or the agents. God is the loving parent. We are the children. Remarkable things happen. We had a new employer, being all powerful. God provided what we needed. If we kept close to God and performed God's work well, my fellows, you ever thought about that? This book speaks very little about the specifics of what that God's work well is, but it gives all the principles that get us there. Humility, respect, helpfulness, kindness, love, tolerance, understanding, honesty, unselfishness, zeal, enthusiasm. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves. What is this footing again? That I am to be divorced from self-seeking motives. That there is a power in position, and when the real Slim Shady stands up, it's not me. I play God, and I need to quit doing that. So I become less and less interested in myself and my little plans and designs. And, you know, in the most smallest molecular way, the selfishness really begins with how much attention I give to a zit on my face that nobody else sees, but I see it the whole day. And I go out there thinking everybody's looking at that. My selfishness can really be reduced to the smallest of things. And it can also be the vastness of my anger, my intolerance, my inability to see a sick person and pray and say, this is a sick person. I am not to engage. Walk away, smile. It's your privilege to have a program, to see others and pray for them. And so more and more, I become interested in seeing what I can contribute to life. What does that look like? You know, this daily relationship with God. To be a contribution to life, to be present every single blessing, to every single blessing that I have right now. And not do a gratitude list or list it in my mind because I'm in some fear of its loss. That I thank God for my eyes with the fear of losing my eyes. That I thank God because right now in this moment, I get to see the value of all that God has wanted for me. I get to see God everywhere in all of my senses. I can see God in all living things. I can smell God in the air. I can feel God when you tell me a story and I get goosebumps. You ever felt that? Yes. I can hear God when I listen to nature, when I listen to earth. I hear Mother Earth speak. And it's silence. And so it says we're blessed to tap into this vital sixth sense when we are living this way of life, the spiritual way of life. Also, this book also knows about this experience of God. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from God, who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of God's Spirit into us. Flow of God's Spirit. When you get that moment of, whoa, I am so blessed to be alive in this moment. To have the power to speak, to have the power to be quiet. To have the power to walk the solution and admit my problems and course correct. To know there is no perfection, even though we are all born whole and complete. There is no false pride. It says to some extent we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense, but we must go further, and that means more action. So the actions I take to continue to draw God near. Talked about all these prayers. Paying attention to the verbiage, the vocabulary that is used is giving me grounds to really come back to what it means to lose interest in all that emanates from selfishness, self-centeredness, the root cause of my problem. Where can I see myself in contribution to life and start drawing God near and near and near in situations when it gets really, really tight? Relapsed, binging, on a spree. Fell off the face of the earth and came back to have the power to admit that I need this way of life. That's drawing God near to me every day. Every day that I know my description of an addict is a good day because I know I need to be here. And so it says, thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want God enough. Do you want God enough, my fellows? My siblings, I have to ponder upon this every day. Do you want God more than this person, place, or thing? Do you want God more than that, that thing you get, that hit you receive out of whatever it is that is your drug of choice? Do you want God enough? And where we do not want God enough, at least where I don't want God enough, God will say, okay, my child, keep the defect. It's all yours. See how long it will last you. I'll be here when you're done. It says, at long last I saw, I felt, I believed. I saw, I felt, I believed. Doesn't that sound like a mantra of drawing God close? See, feel, believe. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. What is scale of pride and prejudice? Everything I know to be right. All my expectations, all my rights and wrongs, all my ideals, all of my ethics, all my values. All the things I know to be right in my professional, personal, and societal capacities. I believe I'm a subject expert on certain things. All of it has to fall from my eyes. A new world came into view. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. I'm in a full-time relationship with God today, and therefore forgiveness, kindness, understanding. And in that full-time relationship, even if I think for a moment I don't need God, I want God. I choose God today. And it's a good place to be in. I no longer negotiate my place in that relationship. It's given. It's for my taking, actually. It says there had been a humble willingness to have God with me. And he came. Do you have the humble willingness to have God with you? That's how you draw God near. The willingness, the humble willingness, which means shoulder away from ears. Stop shaking your fist at God and saying, but I did that for you and you didn't give me anything back. I do all of these things for everybody. You give me nothing in return. To have the humble willingness to soften that space between your eyebrows, to stop rolling your eyes even when your eyes are closed. It says, but soon the sense of God's presence had been blotted out by worldly clamors, the worldly attachments, mostly those within myself. And so it had been ever since. How blind I had been. So this sense of God's presence can come in and my worldly clamors can still come in. How bad do I really want God? Do I want God enough to keep turning the thought over to the power that restores me to a better way of thinking? And when that doesn't work, I call a fellow and I say, I need to pray. I have the allergy of the body and obsession of the mind. I can put my hand up and say, I belong. I need this way of living. Pray with me. And so give another person an opportunity to be helpful too. There, I humbly offered myself to God on page 13, as I then understood God, to do with me as God would. And sometimes that means God is going to remove people, places, and things from my life, and I'm not going to like it. That in my step 6 and 7, I say, I'm willing to start giving it all up. I'll start doing the things I don't want to do, stop doing the things I want to do. But then when it comes down to the real action part, I hold on to the people I love the most. I hold on to the people that are least available. To people, places, things. All earthly. Whatever is your drug of choice. If you have a good stretch of sobriety, consider what it means to be sober and still live dirty. Because the fantasies that I entertain easily take me back to a new way of using, detached from reality. But in this sense, I offer myself to God as I understand God, to do with me as God would, relieve me of this bondage of ideal fantasy of life. And all the expectations I have of myself. I place myself unreservedly, free of doubt, unreservedly, under God's care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself, I was nothing. Now, without God, I was lost. I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend take them away, root and branch. I have not had a drink since. That's the type of willingness. That's the type of, do you want God enough? Root and branch, take away from me. Take away from me this obsession, this imperious urge that continues to guide my actions and takes me back to the deep, dark corners of insanity and death. And my liar has a really justified, well-mannered way of presenting itself. I have to be very careful. It's walking through these lines with me. But you know what? It has a very limited intelligence pool. So it repeats the same thought as it wants me to draw away from God. But what's a little bit of whiskey in my milk? But I'm not a milk drinker. The only milk I have in my drinks is the froth on top of this chai latte. So why is it that I mess with that? A little bit of this won't matter. When that thought arises, I know right there it's pulling me away from God, especially if I'm entertaining the fact that I'm immune to this. Smashing the idea that I am like other people means every day I have to draw near. And when I do, God has always been there. You know, this idea that God has been there. Where have I been making the effort? And in that effort, sometimes it means dealing with situations where the application of steps 6 and 7 becomes redundant. Why isn't God removing this from me? Why isn't this going away? Why am I still upset? And my validation-seeking behavior, why is it that I'm still looking at a star rating system that is human aid? So I get frustrated in that. This book is full of tools in which we get recentered. Put it on paper. Look at where your selfishness has you thinking all about you, so the validation of others becomes so important that without it, you almost have no identity. Your identity is defined by God. The star rating system is one that is divine. And we're all perfect on that system. And so in that, where does it get really tough? In smaller corners of daily activities. When the opportunity presents itself for me to snap back at someone, maybe even say something funny and conceal it with this humor that's twisted. It's not levity. And it's full of ill intentions. And so I can understand that where it says we are to be divorced from thinking that is based on self-pity, dishonesty, or self-seeking motives. What self-seeking motives? I want what I want, and I will present myself however I need to in that situation, control you, force you, often tell you, and then give you the room to make your decision. But I want what I want. And when I don't get what I want, I throw a fit. But it says when we are divorced from that, under those conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance. What are our mental faculties, my fellows? Our imagination, which in my disease, when untreated, imagination doesn't exist. It's all fantasy. Sexual, non-sexual, doesn't matter. What's another mental faculty? Will, my willpower. I only get to have that if I employ this very specific instruction to be divorced from the selfishness, self-pity, and self-seeking ways. What's another mental faculty? Perception. My power of seeing others in God's innocence, especially when they're ill. Some of the closest people to me, to harbor no resentments, to have a new relationship with my own mother, and the ones around me that matter the most. that I can be tolerant towards all parents, of any background, and sponsor them. But I will be intolerant towards my own family. My perception needs changing. Another mental faculty is intuition. Taking a lot of pride in my untreated ways, that my intuition told me it was safe to do that. It was going to be the last time and I could stop. That's not intuition. That's a very, very well-trained parasite liar that knows how to pretend to be the host. So it will tell me that's intuition. But intuitive thinking does come to us, this book says. Reason and memory. My memory will return. I will not have to keep reminding myself that I need to live this way of life. By default, I will know that I need to live this way of life. And so each of these faculties are essential in their own way. It says they will get restored. With assurance, I can make decisions. I can actually be functional. For after all, God gave us brains to use. You know where I like to use that part? Everywhere. When there's gossip, slander, workplace, family, fellowship. Where can I rely on the fact that my fellows, my family members, people of earth have brains to use and they will know the truth? It's not my job to justify, explain. God has given us all brains to use. For some of us out there as parents, guardians, keepers of children, and even animals, where you believe that you have this responsibility to protect these souls, they also have access to the same power. They also have brains to use. So I start looking at that as a way of empowering my fellows and others to seek with assurance to use their mental faculties. Why not work on that? God can be drawn very close to us in that work. Because it says we have to ask God to direct our thinking. Imagine that. That it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. It sounds like a big project to work on with God. And so when I start looking at all of these defects that come up, instead of the frustration of why doesn't it go away? Why doesn't it go away? I start looking at it as this long-term way of working with God. And one day I'm not asking why doesn't it go away? It vanishes. It comes. A peace, sense of security, neutrality returns to my mind. And I will be less willing to step away from God and enter a world of chaos that does not work. Everything in this book points to one direction. And no, I don't mean the One Direction, the band, but, the direction of God, a higher power of your choosing, your wording, your verbiage, your vocabulary. You dress it up. You decide what this everlasting entity is for you, because in drawing this entity closer to me, I get to actually see the privileges of the promises coming true. I actually get to go to bed in my skin knowing that I'm never alone, even when everyone and everything is gone. When everything turns into ashes, I will rise again, and there will be a God of my understanding that will hold me. And that's a beautiful space of knowing that nothing is going to end in a cipher, zero or zilch. And that's the basis of every atheist agnostic idea, that we come from nothing and nowhere and go nowhere. And I can't align with that anymore. Because there is a spiritual life that allows us as physical presence on this earth to have purpose. And in that purpose today, I'm very clear about where I stand. And the work of the daily drawing of God near could be a beautiful, well-balanced spiritual schedule. Nothing that causes injury. Injury happens when there's more load than capacity. So no, this doesn't mean I have to have this extremely packed, stringent schedule. Otherwise, I'm going to act out, think again, and start the misery. That's a state of fear. And where can I balance out the hours that I need to be available to my job, to my family, to service? These categories are important to serve. Where can I remain self-sufficient and in that God-sufficient so I can help others? And so your daily activities will determine how you go to bed. Your nightly inventory and the prayers we take at night, it's the night before the day after. Consider that. How much work am I willing to put into the night before the day after? So when I wake up in the morning, I am more willing to remember that I need to utter the words of a prayer and to thank my feet for touching the floor because I know what it means not to be able to walk. For me to be able to handle a doorknob and turn it and open the door, the simplest things. And to have that moment of quiet with God. It says sit with God quietly. A lot of ways in which these measures become applicable on a daily basis. Where am I willing to get in front of a thought pattern that distances me from these principles? And I've reviewed everything that mitigates that distance. And in that mitigation of that distance, we become God's work. And God does do for us and through us what we could not do for ourselves. I love you, my fellows. You're a big part of this work. If I didn't have the humility and the beauty of your patience when I came into the rooms, I wouldn't be here today. I saw God flowing through you way before I could even have a conception of my own. So to those who have found the power greater than yourselves, continue doing the good work. Those of us who go out and come back, we rely on your consistency to be here. Those of us who carry this responsibility live fuller lives on an altruistic plane. There is no expectation of return, no access to grind, no people to please, no fees to be paid. There's no transactional way to love. So thank you for that. I honor you, and I learned through your testimony how God is drawn near. So I look forward to hearing you. Thank you.
And first up, come on in, Laura. I've asked you to unmute.
Hi, Young. Thank you so much. I think I actually pressed the raise hands button by accident, but while I am here, I don't have to ask a question. I just wanted to say how powerful and wonderful that was. Sorry, my camera is off. I've been moving it around, but Kimia, you're an absolute source of wisdom and power and true God's love. You made such an impression on me, and you made me realize that. You mentioned something about a spot, and I've been so in self today thinking about this spot that I had on my chin, thinking that everyone was looking at me. And I was traveling on a train, and the trains all got cancelled, and I found out the reasons for 4 hours that they were cancelled, and it was because someone was hit by a train, and it all brought it back to me. And I was just so grateful that I have this program, so grateful that I have my life, so grateful that I was only delayed for 4 hours, and this poor person and the family are going through so much grief. And it brought me back to reality. What is a spot? It's nothing compared to things like that. So you reminded me of that today, and I just want to say thank you, and thanks, Young, and thanks to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. Kimi's just put in the chat for those who are on the recording as well as in the meeting. Come to the 12 Steps in 4 Hours workshop for Halloween and meet the crew, 12steps4hours.org. Andrew, please come on in with your question. I've just asked you to unmute, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Young. Yeah, Andrew, recovered addict and alcoholic. Thank you, Young, and everyone that does service, and thank you, Kimia, for a beautiful and powerful share. My question is, Kimia, you spoke about coming from an atheist and agnostic background. Was there a time when you had a sense of the presence of God in your life before you came into the 12-step program?
Thank you, Andrew. What a beautiful question. Absolutely. You know, where it says God is doing for us, and I say through us as well, what we could not do for ourselves. God had been there all of those moments that I didn't know how to conceptualize it. I think from a very young age, I had been very spiritual. I remember the moment when I looked at my hands and my veins and I said, who am I? And I remember what I heard. And I remember hearing something. That's something that I can't deny. It's imprinted in my memory. It's something that I could not potentially make up. It can't be a figment of my imagination that the response was there. And in that response, it said, you know who you are. They call you Kimia, and you wanted to be here. Only to understand that many years later, that was a reminder of a contract I had signed when I asked to come to Earth. And I know that in my very spiritual ways, I always got an opportunity to really right-size my ego, even in my in my career. Decades in politics, I worked. If I didn't have a spiritual way of life, prayers, yoga, meditation, even from a physical perspective, the work could not have been handled. Without that connection, I would not have been able to come to a turning point where I would say yes to 12 steps. I think that power had been with me along the way. And the practices that I chose in that seeking could have been used as a log. I want to mention this. Spiritual practices. I could go to as many yoga retreats as I want. If it's not in conjunction with the power that restores me to sanity, it's just another failed strategy. It's not going to work. For a normal person, it might. Normal person can go to regular yoga classes and be fine. I teach and practice because I don't want to go to jail. You know, like some of us actually need our sanity. And yes, there is a passion. There is all of that. But there is a necessity to be in conjunction with a power that restores me to sanity. So yes, Andrew, I do believe that I had been spiritual in many ways of being connected to nature, to animals, to dogs, to serving. I asked many years ago for God to give me a power, the chance to serve the underprivileged. And so when I started just handing out clothes and blankets on the street of Toronto was simply because I was sick and tired of seeing the same problem and thinking there needs to be a collective solution when I individually was not taking an action. That was a God-inspired action. I cannot take credit for that. The moment that said, hey, you're the one noticing him. Why are you pointing fingers? You ask him what his name is. Ask him what kind of clothing he needs for these brash winters, right? So inspired action often gives a testimony of where God has been there. Often when I can't find a tree, I look for the fruits, and the fruits are all there. Thank you, Andrew.
Lovely. Thank you, Andrew. Great question. Next up, Oliver, please come on in.
Evening, guys. Can you hear me? Yeah. All good. Cool. Thank you for your share. Thanks everyone for coming and making it a meeting as well. Yeah, I really like what you just said about the homeless thing. Putting in the action. So I was reading the 12 and 12 today, step 11, and I always do have not confusion over it, but I did for a long time, and I've come to the point where I think I'll always do my review on a night, and then I'll try and look at it in the morning, and then maybe pause throughout the day. But when I was reading it today, I'd never read it either, and it was like, if you don't know how to meditate, we're gonna tell you how. Basically, we're gonna give you some insight. And then they broke down that St. Francis prayer, and it really made me realize, like, for a long time I was like, I thought guided meditations and things like that were like really, really the wrong way to go. And although I don't think there should be a substitute for the reviews, it made me realize that, like, that step 11, what they're saying is it is a bit like a free for all. As long as you do them things, it's a bit of a free for all in like exploring it all. And a guided meditation is like breaking down a prayer if somebody's doing that. And I was just wondering, what do you do surrounding your step 11? What do you do? Because I can tell you're a very spiritual person. Yeah, I just thought it'd be a good opportunity to ask you that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Today I get to have this blessing of being an embodiment coach and a meditation yoga practitioner myself, and teachings and learnings. Like, let's say tomorrow. Tomorrow is a full day of sponsorship for me. On Wednesdays, I sponsor. But I also have a morning meditation practice that happens with a local community group. And every other week, I sit with a Tibetan monk. And this is not to say that we have to sit with others for this practice to be complete. It's to say that I fill up that cup way before I come into this relationship with others in giving and transmitting a message. And so I know from the day before what my morning meditation practice is. Every other day, I also have a meditation practice. My own favorite practice of meditation is silent meditation, but I lead guided meditations. And many of you have been in spaces where I lead guided meditations, and there is a link with the spiritual cartels that available for that, and wherever it's helpful. But my personal practice, sometimes it's that moment of just sitting in silence. And I live on a lake, just looking at the trees, having a moment with this beauty of the sky that shows up every day, having that conscious contact to say, God, I see you, and I know you see me. To sit and have that moment of silence at the top of the morning, knowing that the night before I also did that. I went to bed with prayers. The last things I uttered last night were step 7 prayer over and over again. Because I could have taken a thought that would take me somewhere to sleep, or I could have taken God to take me somewhere to sleep. And I chose God, and it felt great. Because the next morning, when I woke up at 6:30 to teach at 7 in the morning, which is also my own practice, I treat some of the classes that I teach as my own practice as well. Even if I wasn't teaching it to anyone, I would be practicing it myself. Moving meditation or stillness. Doesn't matter if you take that on a walk with you, or if you sit and pray and you sit in that silence because perhaps you need to sit. But this practice that says continued conscious contact, it's throughout the day. It's not just at night, in the morning, in the middle of the day. So at no point do I see myself outside of step 11 contract. At no point do I see myself outside of my breath, because I connotate my breath with the existence of God. Every time I'm mindful of an inhale and an exhale, I know I'm here, I'm in the present, God exists. I can pause. I cannot have an answer. I can say I'll get back to you, to people, right? So where it shows itself, mindfulness and focus and concentration comes through practice. And these meditative practices, on Wednesdays, I lead a meditation for my recovery network. You know, I have these spots in my calendar where I am of service and in receipt of that, in my job, in recovery, and with my family. Sometimes it's my meditation practice to sit in the middle of my untreated codependent family and not interfere. That's the real work. See, I can sit in silence and be all prayerful, and it's great. But can I sit in the middle of chaos, or can I sit in the, I was in Shavasana, in this like meditative mode, when I was sitting in a hospital emergency waiting to be seen. And the whole time I could hear conversations around how much a bag of chips costs today. You know, I could hear the outside, but my inside was just so soft and so at peace. So where it says we don't struggle, we relax and take it easy. That's an indication of this very work, that conscious contact with God. I love that pre-meeting someone said, step 10 and 11, don't have to wait until 10 and 11. Yes, it's a way of life. You can start at the very beginning, before the beginning. You know, it's a way of making that conscious contact, a way that I no longer negotiate. So if some of us are here and have good spiritual practices and they work for us, it's probably because it's a non-negotiable. There's no skipping it. And I'm not willing to pay the cost. Usually when skipping it, there is a cost. I hope that's helpful too.
Thank you, Oliver, for your question. Next up, Rizal, would you like to unmute, my friend?
Good afternoon, party people. My name is Rizal, and I'm hella alcoholic. Coming in from San Francisco, California. Thank you so much for everybody that's holding this meeting. And welcome to all the newcomers that are here. I really hope you stay. And anybody that's feeling sick or suffering, I love you very much, and there's nothing you can do about it. Good to see everybody. Kimia, thank you so much for your share. I love when people share the quiet thing out loud. You know, this book contains a design for living, which is a spiritual journey, and there's no getting away from it. People do try, and just like Dr. Bob says, you know, I don't want to paraphrase him, but he basically says, if your intellectual pride stops you from getting what's in this book, I feel sorry for you. And I do too, and I'm here for you. I will help you go through this. My favorite promises are the 10-step promises. And in there it says, we have entered the world of the spirit. Ooh, I like that. Our next function, what's it say? Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. That's so powerful to me. It is so powerful to me. When I was out there living out my disease, I loved taking credit for all the good stuff and blaming you for the bad stuff. And if you do the math on that, there's just no room for a higher power. So I never had really my own thoughts on a connection with a higher power. It was all just stuff that I had heard and stuff that I agreed to and sounded smart. And I would just say stuff and blah, 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 blah. But now that I've come into this program of recovery, it's allowed me a platform to actually investigate and experience a conscious contact with a higher power. And that's fantastic. My question to you, because us real alcoholics, we know that no one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. So coming from where I come from and having to deal with a lot of newcomers that are going through a lot of like really, I'm from the inner city of San Francisco. And trying to find a conscious contact with God for a lot of people is really difficult. So my question to you is, when was the last time you had a really difficult time turning it over? What was that like? Why was it so difficult? And how did it turn out?
Thank you, Rizal. Thank you. And beautiful. Yes. I was going to say a couple months ago, but I think the one before that would have been when I saw a holy cow. And it didn't start from seeing a holy cow. There was a break in a relationship that I was in, and it was all because of my selfishness. And when I say there was a break in that communication over my conduct, not my willingness to see my selfishness and expecting the other person to resolve the matter in a way that I would have wanted them. And this person was a normal person. And a normal person doesn't need to be told how to be. They will be exactly how they are. They would wake up neutral, go throughout the day neutral, go to bed neutral. So my chaotic ways of demanding apology, demanding some kind of amends, kept pointing me towards God more and more, because it wasn't being entertained. And I remember one night I had two choices. It says either blot out the consciousness of your intolerable situation, which means go to war, argue some more, die tonight on this one. Yeah, you die tonight. Or reach for this, accept spiritual help. And I remember looking at my partner at the time and just shutting my mouth and just grabbing this book and going upstairs and reading this book and falling more and more into the work I had to do from the inventory and quickly to the simple actions that needed to follow. So the more I resisted the word of God, which was take responsibility for your actions and have a profound alteration to your reaction. No apologies, no I'm sorries, none of that works. Change your behavior. And so the more I was drawn to that, the more I was told, you know, and this was not in Canada. So every morning I would just go to the ocean. Every afternoon, go to the ocean. Evening, go to every time I wanted to resort to human aid, go to the ocean. I knew that my obsession was really loud and the body allergy was there. Easily angry and restless, irritable, and discontented. And one day I remember I took one of my dogs and I was like, let's just go for a walk. And I went on this walk to a road unpaved, rather, this red dirt. And I have footage of this. and these beautiful trees. And we go on this walk. On the way back, I hear the sound, what I thought would have been 1,000 cows coming my way. It was one cow. And as the cow starts coming my way, I'm thinking, okay, either I have to get the fuck out or run back to where I was. But then the voice said, sit in the middle of the road and videotape this. I don't know why. So I did. And the cow came close. In that moment, it communicated what it needed to communicate. And this is not a normal thing in Costa Rica. One cow doesn't go on a walk. They move together, and they usually have a farmer owner. So there's just one cow out of nowhere. Communicated. It said what it needed to say. God said what God needed to say. And it's not even in words. I can't express it. What felt like an actual hour communication was probably a few seconds on the outside. And I heard, clear the path, let the animal walk. I clear the path, my dog clears the path. And as this cow is passing by, I see the word God imprinted on its back. Hence why I call it the Holy Cow. And, being full of these emotions I couldn't express, I'm just like videotaping this. And I'm like, okay, that's also not a thing. People don't, put words on their animals. And I just started crying, and I just started saying, God, I see you. God, I see you. God, I see you. Your soldier is not lost. I'm right here. I'm here to serve you. I am rid of all selfishness. I see you as you see me. God had to, every day I ask God, reveal yourself to me. Reveal yourself to me. Tell me you need me in this work. And God said, I need you in this work. Not what has distracted you in that relationship. Not all the hills you're willing to die on. That person, place, or thing doesn't even matter. There's a bigger purpose. And I think in that moment, I was really reminded of that. When I ran home, I asked my people, I was like, I showed it to them and they couldn't answer. These are normal people with actual no beliefs, some of them. And they couldn't answer. They're like, no sé, I don't know, mommy, I don't know, like, what is, and so I didn't understand. But this book says it's the miraculous demonstrations of God. When you seek it, when you want it enough, it shows itself. I remember that to be a removal of a big blockage for me, which was my selfishness in a cloak of recovery. It spoke recovery. That's what made it even more cunning and baffling. That it would justify why the other person was at fault in seemingly recovered ways. So yes, I see that result as an incident where it was really hard. Every day I woke up with the willingness, and when I didn't have the willingness, I just prayed that God would give me the willingness to remember who I am and my purpose. I hope that's helpful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Azal, for your question. Oh, thank you for sharing that, Kimia.